Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on how to get published in a peer-reviewed journal. Today's topic is publishing ethics and integrity. We're very happy to organize this webinar in partnership with Taylor & Francis. And I would like to welcome our distinguished speaker for today's session, Ms. Sarah Robbie. She's the head of research, integrity and ethics at Taylor & Francis. Sarah, welcome. She's joining us from Oxford in the UK today. Great that you are on board. Let me just say a few more lines about Sarah. Her work at Taylor & Francis involves supporting journal editors and editorial teams in addressing publication ethics and research integrity issues, and providing training and licensing with the Committee on Publication Ethics as well. So before we give Sarah the floor and let her talk about this very exciting topic, I would like to give you a brief introduction about EURAXESS. And my name is Samrat Kumar, by the way. I'm the country representative. And for those of you who are joining for the first time, I think it will be interesting to know what EURAXESS is and what kind of services we provide to researchers here in India and how we are connected also to the European Union. Before we start with the presentation, I would like to just do a quick poll with you guys. So I would like to have the first question for you, just to get an idea how much you know about us and EURAXESS. So is the poll visible?
Yes, Samrat, the poll is visible. People are already putting in the answers.
Yeah. So I'm just trying if because I cannot see the poll myself. But I think my colleague Somalia, you're able to see it, right?
Yes. So as of now, the results are 71% of the total attendees know what EURAXESS is, and 29% don't know.
Okay, great. So that's good to know. And then I would like to present a second you as well.
Second poll is on.
Yeah, Somalia, could you just give me the figures?
Sure.
Because I'm
People
not
are putting it right now.
Yeah.
They're answering right now.
Yeah. Do we have a result?
Yeah, we're getting basically only 61% people have voted as of now. They're voting right now.
Okay.
The current census is that approximately 30% of people have heard about the Horizon 2020 and its researcher mobility programs. About 69% now. It was 70 prior to this. 69% have not heard about it.
Okay, so that's good news for me. So it means I will spend more time on the Horizon 2020 mobility program and less time on presenting EURAXESS, since it seems that our audience is aware of us and our services. So let me start with the presentation. I hope you're able to see my slides. Yeah. Could you just give me okay, Sarah? Yeah, okay. I just switch off my camera also. Yeah, so it's better for everyone to focus on the slides. So the Horizon 2020 is the largest framework program for research innovation in the world, and it's totally funded by the European Union and its member states and countries who are associated with the program. It has three pillars. One is excellent science, the second one is industrial leadership, and the third pillar is societal challenges. Under these three pillars, there are a variety of funding opportunities, calls, collaboration opportunities for European partners with institutions and scientists across the globe. Now, Horizon 2020 is in its final stage. It was running from 2014 until end of this year, a 7 years framework program. But the good news is that the EU Parliament has agreed for the next framework program, which will start 2021 and will be called Horizon Europe. So it's time actually to move to the new program, but still we have plenty of calls which are open under Horizon 2020 and plenty of opportunities for Indian researchers, young researchers, experienced researchers, and institutions who are seeking for an international collaborative project. Let me just go to the next slide. Yeah. So how to participate in a Horizon 2020 or in an EU-funded program? For Indian nationals, there are basically four main ways they can participate. First, as a participant or scientist in the so-called Marie Skłodowska-Curie Action Program. These are PhD and postdoc positions within projects which are funded by the EU, and they are known as Marie Skłodowska-Curie Action. I think Marie Skłodowska-Curie is a name to all scientists in the world, and in order to honor this famous leading female scientists of our contemporary times, the European Union has named the program after her. I will talk a bit more about these PhD and postdoc opportunities under the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions. Another program where Indian scientists and researchers can apply is the European Research Council grants. The ERC is the premium funding agency of the European Union, and in a global perspective, it's one of the best funded agencies, and it funds excellent sciences. This is more for experienced researchers who already have established themselves in their career, already have a PhD or obtained a postdoc. We will also talk about this in a few minutes. Another way is to participate as a partner in research innovation programs under Horizon 2020. That's mostly also for institutions and principal investigators to be part of research teams. The last path to participate under Horizon 2020 for Indian nationals are the so-called co-funded calls. These are calls where the European Union and the partner country, in our case India, agree to chip in on both sides for a specific call which is of mutual interest. So right now, just to give an example, the EU has just opened the call on the Green Deal. The Green Deal is a flagship project of the European Union to create a carbon neutral continent and climate friendly research and innovation technologies. And here the EU and India are partnering on certain calls where Indian scientists, Indian researchers, institutions will be equally funded by the Indian government, and the European partners will be funded by the EU. So this is also a very exciting opportunity for Indian researchers to participate in so-called co-funded calls. Now let's come to the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions. If you look at let's say your career ladder, each of you will find yourself on a certain step right now. I think most of you have heard of Erasmus+, the mobility program of the European Union for young students and postgraduates. Above that, we have the MSCA action programs. These are for doctoral postdoc students, and on junior professor, associate professorship level, you have the ERC grants. There are 3 different grants: starter, consolidator, and advanced. So you can see where on the stair you are and where you are going to move, and what opportunities the European Union has for you to be funded, your project to be funded. Now, under the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions, we have 4 main programs. One is called the IF, the Individual Fellowship, which is a postdoc opportunity. Then we have the ITNs, Innovative Training Networks. These are projects funded where PhD positions are made available and PhD candidates are being recruited from across the world. These are open to anyone, any nationality to apply for. I will talk about this in a second. Another program of interest is the RISE. This is a staff exchange program between institutions. So Indian institutions can partner with European institutions and get funding for this staff exchange. The last program is co-fund. This is more relevant for European institutions if they are creating a project and are applying for funds. The European Union will co-fund a project, means university and European Union will together fund this program. Under that co-fund program, there are also PhD and postdoc opportunities for international researchers. The ITNs, the Innovative Training Networks, what are these? These are, as I said, these are projects which are funded totally by the European Union, and within that, the program coordinators, the partners, the consortium make PhD positions available. And the aim here is to train a new generation of creative, entrepreneurial, and innovative early stage researchers. There's a very strong link between the academic and the non-academic sectors. So intersectoral mobility, working with the industry is very, very important in this PhD program. So if you think you would like to explore that opportunity to work also with non-academic sectors during your PhD, these ITN programs are absolutely for you. There are three different programs: the European Training Network, the European Industrial Doctorate, and European Joint Doctorates. Training Network, don't be mistaken, this is a fully funded 3 to 4 year PhD. It's not a short training. You will be fully trained in a PhD program and will obtain your PhD after that. European Industrial Doctorate, already the name says it clearly, this is working and training, getting a training with the non-academic sector. So these are projects where also industry partners are involved. Joint doctorates means there are different universities in different European countries having developed a joint doctoral program, and Indian candidates can apply and join those programs. How to apply? Pretty much straightforward. It's like applying for a job. If you apply for an ITN PhD position in a European project, you are basically applying for a job because you will get a salary. You will get a salary plus additionally a very handsome package with living, family, and mobility allowance. So it's even possible to bring spouse and children with that PhD to Europe for the time period. The projects are already set by the partner organizations, by the consortiums. So it means they are looking for specific the project in nanoscience or the project in bioscience and life science, whatever. They were looking for, of course, PhD candidates with a similar background, which fits to the project. All fields are funded here, so you will find projects within STEM, but also within social sciences and humanities, and also economies. The deadlines are ongoing, so there are no fixed deadlines. You will see that on the EURAXESS portals and websites, you will find that there are open calls all the time looking for PhD candidates in different fields. What you need, eligibility criteria, of course, you have to be qualified to undertake a PhD. Of course, transcript of your grades, CV, motivation letter. Each and every call has different parameters. You have to check that, read that carefully on the EURAXESS job website or the MSCA website, and then apply for it. So this is to the PhD programs. Now, for those who already have a PhD and are interested in a postdoc, they should look into the IF, the Individual Fellowship Program. The Individual Fellowship Program works like this. There are two main programs under it. One is known as the European Fellowship. That means that any scientists, any young scientists from any part of the world can come to Europe for a period of 12 to 24 months to do his postdoc at a European institution. The other way around is that European researchers or researchers based in Europe can apply for the global fellowship and go to any country outside of Europe, so-called third countries, including India, for a period of 12 to 24 months, with a returning clause that they have to come back for the last year of the postdoc to their home institution. So just to again summarize, European fellowships means Indian researchers can go to Europe. Now you can find a host institution and a supervisor in 43 countries, 27 EU member states, plus 16 countries which are associated with Horizon 2020. And these are countries who are not part of the European Union, but they are part of the larger European research area. And these are countries, for instance, like Israel, Turkey, Switzerland, Norway. So these are also countries as an option for you to find an institution who would be ready to host you for a postdoctoral stay. Global fellowship, as I said, is the other way around. European researchers can go to India. The good news about global fellowship is that the entire cost is funded and covered by the European Union. So the Indian host institution, the partner institution, doesn't have any financial liability towards the global fellow. How to apply? All nationalities can apply. As I said, no age restriction to apply. You have to be affiliated to an institution, of course. Mobility is a must criteria, and the very good news is this is a bottom-up approach. There are no fixed priorities, topical priorities in this call. It's about your research. If you are convinced that you have an excellent research project, then you apply, and it will be the only criteria will be how excellent your project is. It doesn't matter from which field. It can be social sciences, humanities. It can be from literature, philosophy. You name it. It's just about showing that your research is very, very excellent. Another good news is that Indian researchers are performing extremely well in this call. There are currently more than 300 Indian who have been awarded the individual fellowship. And this makes India the country with the most recipients outside of Europe and North America. So this is really good news that Indian researchers are performing extremely well in this call. Just to give you quick figures, you see that the living allowance, which is the salary, is approximately 5,000 euro, and that's really great, I would say, sum. Plus you get a monthly mobility allowance, plus family allowance as well for the postdoc position, and other costs are also covered by the grant, institutional unit cost, for instance. So how does it work? Basically, we have dedicated websites to explain you very in detail, like the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Individual Fellowship website, and also our EURAXESS website has a dedicated section on that. You have to find a host institution, actually a supervisor who is ready to host you, and you submit the proposal together with your supervisor, and then apply. And if you are selected, you get the grant. Now the deadline for this year's call has already passed. It was on 9th of September, but the good news is that there will be also a call in 2021. Tentative dates are April. So already now it would be a good time, if you're interested to apply for such a position. It would be a very good time to start looking for a supervisor or a host institution. And there are also expression of interest. There are many universities, many institutions who are looking for candidates. So you have to browse our EURAXESS website to see who is ready to, if you don't already have a host or a supervisor. These are the websites where you can find more information about the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions and the Horizon 2020 programs. Okay, just to summarize it, how to participate, again, find a relevant call, either a mobility call or a collaborative call, find partners, find a host, submit a proposal, and be selected and get involved. Now, as you know, that job opportunities, funding, as well as personalized services and training are very fundamental to successful career in research, and therefore the European Union has launched this EURAXESS platform for researchers in motion, which is basically a gateway to Europe. I just saw that I skipped this slide about Brexit and the UK. I think we should still keep 1 minute on this slide. There are many open questions about the UK because, as you know, UK has left the European Union, and therefore also many agreements, of course, have been annihilated. Now, but when it comes to Horizon 2020, the good news is that UK will still continue to participate, and including Maurice Glossary Career Actions and ERC grants. So it means that if you are a beneficiary from a UK host institution, you can continue to take part and you will get the grant, even if your project or your postdoc or your PhD goes beyond 2020. Okay, now just very quickly about EURAXESS, as we see in the poll that most of you know about it. We offer these services of giving you job opportunities, information about collaboration, about fundings, about trainings like this, like what we're doing with Taylor and Francis. These are all free services for researchers in India. And we have 4 legs. The first is the job and funding portal, where you will find thousands of offers daily. We have a very refined search engine tool where you can find calls in your field and also the countries you are interested to. We also have a section on travel grants for conferences as well, where institutions are publishing those. Next to our job and funding, we also provide information and assistance, which is very personalized, not only on the EURAXESS India team, but also in our more than 42 countries. We have service centers. We have around 600 service centers across Europe, which help researchers to get settled in, to give them practical personal support when it comes to developing the career, but also to settling into a new host country. We also have a partnering tool with a large database. If you're looking for institutional partnerships or researchers in your field, you can also search in the partnering tool as a EURAXESS member. For that, you have to sign up and become a member to access those partnering tools. Then we have the worldwide section as well. As I told you, we're not only here in India, but we're also in many different regions of the world, including South Korea and the ASEAN region. Annually, we publish 60,000 job vacancies. So if you are applying for research positions in Europe, they're practically like fully funded jobs, either by the EU or by the national agencies or the universities you're applying to. We have over 100,000 users, researchers used with EURAXESS. So we're the largest, I would say, researcher data, one of the largest in the world. And there are currently more than 500 funding opportunities available, average every month. And all areas of science, technology, innovation, as well as social science humanities are published on our portal. The worldwide map, already told about that. Let's go to the EURAXESS India website. So if you click on our website, let me just show it to you very quickly how it looks like. So here you see this is our website. Here we have like a news section with different important information regarding EU policies or events, and also open positions, for instance, under the Maurice Glossary Career Actions, the ERC, and other also bilateral calls. Event section, you can see here upcoming events in the member states, but also upcoming events, EURAXESS, or for instance, ERC and MSc, so that you will always keep you updated on that. If you have the job and funding section, you will get here, and then you can look for job offers. And here you can basically look at for your researcher field. Let's see, you are a first stage researcher and you're looking country-wise. Let's look UK, because our guest speaker is from the UK. Let's see what, sorry, a little bit fast. United States. Here you see all the countries are listed where currently we have the job positions are available. So UK, let's see, for early stage researchers, it's saying 338 positions right at the moment. So here, computational biologists, PhD students in future machine learning systems. So there you see they're all like updated job announcements here for PhD postdoc or experienced researchers as well. We have a career development section as well, as I said, where we offer like a handbook for how to develop, improve your skills. Also, what kind of different trainings we offer and webinars, so you can browse that as well. The main thing which you should do is absolutely to the EURAXESS India website and click on this sign up and become a free member today. You also have the opportunity to go to the other EURAXESS hubs and also connect there with global researchers. There are also national portals. So it means we have 42 countries who have national portals where you find dedicated information on that country, and also the jobs which are published are available in each and every country. Okay, let's just go back to my presentation and complete it. So we give you a lot of information for free. We have a large research community already in India, and we provide basically updated calls and policy reports to your house, to your inbox, to your mail inbox. We do events, as you know. We have the Science Slam competition, which is coming up the deadline is very shortly. You should definitely go on our website and see if you want to slam your way to Europe and be the first prize winner and get a free ticket to Europe. This is then for you, this competition. Also, we are having the European Research Day in India, together with the EU delegation coming up, where we will talk about the so-called Green Deal, the next framework program that's going to be in October 14th and 15th. We currently also have launched a global survey on the impact of COVID-19 on researchers and academics' mobility. And this is a very policy-orientated survey which will help the European Commission to shape and to create and improve better structures for researchers, international researchers, and their mobility to Europe. So please take a few minutes and join this survey and take part and help us to create better solutions for international researchers. The survey is still out and possible to participate, so I kindly request you to take a few minutes on that, maybe after the webinar or over the weekend, as you like. Yeah, back to the Science Slam. Just take the chance, have a look, watch our promotional video, get inspired, and try it out. This is really a fun event to present your research in a very entertaining way to a non-expert audience. And you can use all kinds of props. You can dance, sing, you can do live experiments, whatever, and yeah, and show the world and show that science is more than experiments. It's about fun and entertainment as well. See our winners of the last 2 years. This is their boarding pass to Europe. So this could be, your picture could be here in the next year's slide as well. So do join and become part of our research community. So these are our contact details. You can reach us on india@euraxess.net. You can of course follow us on social media and Twitter and Facebook. And yeah, don't hesitate to contact us if you have any questions regarding PhD and postdoc opportunities in Europe. Okay, thank you very much. That was my presentation. It took a little longer than I had expected, but thank you for bearing with us. And now I would just like to hand over the mic to our dear colleague, Sarah. Before we do that, Sarah, we just have 2 short polls for you as well to see. Just give you a background check on the audience. Somalia, could you launch the first poll?
It's on, Samrat.
Okay. So the first question here is, have you ever published something in a peer-reviewed journal? Are we getting a result?
People are still voting. As of now, we have a 65-35 answer.
65, yes.
Yes.
Okay. So that's a good number, I would say. And the second question was, are you planning to publish something in a peer-reviewed journal, right?
Using the first one, and I'm launching the second one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the second question is on. So as of now, 97% of people would are planning to publish their paper in a peer-reviewed journal. 3% are still thinking about it.
Okay. So Sarah, you see there is a huge interest in getting published in a peer-reviewed journal, and I think it's time to hand over to you, and that you can tell us more about the ethics of publishing and also the integrity of research. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Could you, oh, thank you, pass me control to my screen. Just getting the slides up. Now, can you see the slides?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, I'll stop sharing my webcam so the slides can take up more space. Go. So thank you for your very warm welcome to the EURAXESS India webinar. I'm really pleased to be here to talk to you about ethics and integrity in scholarly publishing. So as Samrat's already said, I'm Sarah Robbie. I'm Head of Research Integrity and Ethics at Taylor & Francis. And just get the next slide up. Sorry, it seems to have stuck on the first slide. There we go. Sorry about that. So what I'll be taking you through today are ethics in the scholarly system, and we'll talk about research ethics and key considerations. And some of this will touch on clinical trials and registration, and we're going to talk about informed consent as well, which is particularly important across all subject areas. Then we'll move on to publication ethics. So who guides this and what are the common issues that arise? We'll talk a bit about the responsibility of authorship and the purpose of correction, expression of concern, and retraction notices that you might come across when you're reading academic publications. So shed a bit of light on what those are. Then, as 97% of you are planning to publish in an academic journal soon, we'll give you some tips on avoiding problems when you come to prepare and submit your article for consideration. And then there'll be an opportunity for Q&A at the end. So as I mentioned in that overview, we split up ethics into sort of two strands, and those are research ethics and publication ethics. So under research ethics, you might be familiar with some of the declarations here. So the Declaration of Helsinki is a statement of ethical principles for medical research involving human subjects. And that includes research on identifiable human material and data. And there are principles in the Declaration of Helsinki that are, really quite applicable to lots of research areas, particularly around informed consent. And we'll go into some more depth on that later. You have the Declaration of Bellum, which outlines the responsibility of scientists, researchers, and environmentalists in addressing the local community needs and the subject areas that they're working in. And it acknowledges the central role of Indigenous peoples in all aspects of global planning. For some, the society's codes of ethics, some areas that those societies' ethics policies are really important, and you might be familiar with some of these more in the arts, humanities, and social sciences. You should be familiar with your own institutional ethics committee and their review processes. And research ethics are also dictated by local laws. Publication ethics are, publication ethics are consensus based within the community. And we'll discuss this in a bit more depth later on, but there's some key groups here that you may recognize. So the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, the ICMJE, is there none? The Committee on Publication Ethics were mentioned earlier, so we call them COPE, and they're a member organization for publishers and journals who provide guidance on publishing ethics issues. And we'll talk a little bit about good publication practice, or GPP3, which is for medical journals in a bit as well. So we'll first discuss some of the research ethics issues, and then we'll move on to publication ethics. So research ethics for humans, the ultimate aim of having these rules and guidance around this is to protect human participants. So you really want to be ensuring that research is conducted to serve the interest of the individuals that the research is being conducted with, and the groups and or sort of wider society that will be affected by the research. So you're looking to manage risk and make sure that the participants are aware of the risks before they sign up to be part of your research project. You also need to be careful considering protection of their confidentiality and ensuring that they have given you informed consent to partake in the research. You'll also want to bear in mind respect for cultures and heritage, and this is where that Declaration of Bellum comes in. So we've pointed out here that the Declaration of Helsinki covers that human material, human data, human subjects aspect. And any research you do involving humans, even if it's in a social sciences area, will generally have to go through your appropriate ethics committee, which will be usually the one that is based at your institution. So there's some more guidance here available from the World Health Organization. I've got links to the dual use research of concern, and to the Declaration of Helsinki and the Declaration of Bellum, and I believe you're getting the slides after this, so you'll be able to access the links from the slide deck. The next strand of research ethics I wanted to cover was animals. So this is experimental research on vertebrates or any regulated invertebrates has to comply with institutional, national, or international guidelines, and where available should have been approved by your appropriate ethics committee. So you might have heard of the 3 R's principle, which is replace, reduce, refine. So replace is if there is a replacement, a non-animal replacement that you can use in your research rather than using animals, you should look to use that. Reducing is about reducing the number of animals in your experiments. So not so few that it is, the research you get isn't actually any good because there aren't significant results there, but not so many that this is sort of a waste of animals to actually do the research. And refine is about refining the methodology, again, to make sure the animal welfare is kept in the top of mind. So there's guidance here from the Basel Declaration, which the aim of that is to bring the scientific community together to further advance the implementation of ethical principles, such as the 3 R's that we just touched upon. So whenever animals are being used, and it calls for more trust, transparency, and communication on the sensitive topic of animals in research. I've also linked to the ARRIVE guidelines here, and they're a really useful checklist of recommendations to improve the reporting of research involving animals. So when you're putting together your article, it's a very useful guide to what should be in the published research to maximize its quality and reliability. and it enables others to then better scrutinize, evaluate, and reproduce it from your research publications. The next strand of research ethics we'll talk about today are plants. So experimental research on plants, and this could be either cultivated or wild, including collection of the plant material, must comply again with institutional, national, and international guidelines around collection and use. And you should always remember to do field studies, conducting them in line with accordance to local legislation. So more guidance here can be found in the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, and the IUCN policy statement on research involving species at risk of extinction. When discussing different study designs and ethics, different study designs will have slightly different ethical considerations. So for example, if you're looking to do a retrospective study, you must obtain permission to use the participant details from a database, for example, prior to starting the study. Participants in those studies should be kept anonymous, and you will have to acquire permission, as I said, to use the dataset for research. If you're doing a prospective cohort study or a randomized clinical trial, you should remember to get informed consent, making sure that participants are kept safe at all times and that patients or study participants know that they can leave the study at any time without any repercussions. We discussed in animal ethics complying with institutional, national, and international guidelines and using those 3 R's. And where you're working with an endangered species, so be it plant or animal, where you've got your ethical approval, sometimes it might be necessary to redact the information about the location of the plant or animal to protect and continue conservation efforts. So if you do have any questions about that and you're working with endangered species, do speak to the journal editor before submitting if you have questions about if you will need to redact certain information. If you're working with biosafety and security, remember to consider all possible dual use of research and take steps to mitigate misuse of the information that might be provided through any publications you produce. So informed consent, and I really wanted to highlight this today because I think quite often researchers think informed consent is sort of more, when you're doing medical studies, and it's really important then, but is it important in other cases? So we would say that informed consent should be documented in any study involving human participants. So this includes your prospective studies and your randomized clinical trials. It also includes things like interviews and focus groups, where sometimes people don't necessarily think about informed consent there. If you're working with children, you will need to get parental or guardian consent, and the age at which that applies will be determined by national laws, but it's typically between 16 and 18. You'll also need guardian consent for any vulnerable groups that you're working with. If, when submitting your article to the journal for peer review, and you've had a study that has involved human participants, but the ethics committee waived the need for any consent, this needs to be explained in your article so that the journal editor can take this information on board when reviewing your article. Typically, informed consent is documented in a written form, but in some cases, verbal consent will be more appropriate. For example, if you're working with a group of participants who are unable to read. And again, if you document that in the article that you're submitting to a journal, and note that it was signed off by an ethics committee. So the major elements of informed consent, and I touched on some of this earlier, is the disclosure of information to the participants. So what is the study about? What are the potential outcomes of the study, the hypothesis you're working to? What explanation of risks have you provided to them? Are the risks clear? Have they been given the ability to leave the study at any time and note that they can do this? And their participation, it should be stressed, is entirely voluntary. You'll also need to examine the competency of the participant to consent, or potentially the parent and guardian. So Taylor and Francis have editorial policies available on our author services website. So they're pretty detailed. They cover everything there from affiliations and listing your affiliation in an article to the use of third-party material. So there's a lot there. Do have a read of them before you submit your article for review, because they'll give you a lot of information about what should be present in your article before submitting it to the journal.
Sarah, sorry to interrupt. Actually, your voice is a little low.
All right. Is it okay now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, a little better. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So we'll move on to publication ethics. So what really are publication ethics? I mentioned at the start that they're based on consensus about standards and best practices within the scholarly publishing community. And you'll see some names here. So the European Association of Science Editors, they have the SAGER guidelines around sex and gender reporting in research. The ICMJE, we'll discuss them a little bit later on, well known for their competing interest disclosure forms. Council of Science Editors has an editorial policy committee that our director Sabina Alam is part of. And ISMAP, who provides the good publication practice guidelines, which we'll mention in a bit. So all of these groups work towards that consensus and providing guidelines. And ultimately, this is to ensure the integrity of the scholarly record, so that when you are reading a journal article, you are able to trust what you read. And it also helps you as a scholar and researcher to be able to know that you can build upon that published work. So who guides publication ethics? Let's have a look at some of the groups I mentioned. So the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, they provide a set of recommendations that I've again linked to here. And these guidelines really help standardize the ethics, preparation, formatting, reporting, and publication of content from medical journals. The Committee of Publication Ethics, of which Taylor and Francis is a member, they're really a forum for editors and publishers, and they provide a lot of educational resources for journal editors and for publishers, and resources for how to handle publication ethics issues. So they have a quarterly forum for members where they advise editors on how to handle cases of research and publication misconduct. And they have a number of discussion documents on hot topics within scholarly publishing. For example, they've done one on preprints, one on expressions of concern, and I think they've done one on predatory publishing as well. So they're a very useful resource. The World Association of Medical Editors is an association of editors who represent, again, medical journals globally. And you'll see that the aims of the group are about fostering cooperation and improving those editorial standards. ISMAP, or the International Society for Medical Publication Professionals, they own the Good Publication Practice Guidelines. You might have heard them called GPP3. So they were last updated in 2015. They've been developed to ensure that clinical trials sponsored by pharmaceutical companies are published in a really responsible and ethical manner. So you'll notice that a lot of these groups are medical in Nature. And so the Committee on Publication Ethics has been doing a lot of work to make sure that its resources are really applicable to arts, humanities, and social sciences. But I would say that, you know, a lot of the recommendations and guidance that come out of these groups are also applicable to other subject areas. But why are, you know, publication ethics really important? So in 2018, Science published a paper which was an analysis between Science and Retraction Watch on the Retraction Watch database. So Retraction Watch started off as a blog. You might have heard of them, and they produce articles on retracted research and hot topics within publication ethics. And they have a database of retractions across publishers. So they analyzed this data. And you'll see here at the top of the screen, there's sort of almost a wave with different colored stripes. And this is the growth in retractions since about 1997. And you'll see the bottom layer, sort of dark orange layer, is retractions for fraud. And this is a huge proportion of the retractions that they studied, and it continues to grow. So fraud includes fabrication and falsification of data. It includes things like plagiarism, and it will also include other forms of misconduct, for example, fake peer review. And if you look at the bottom chart, you'll see that the fake peer review is the pale orange line, and it peaked around 2015, where there was a particular sort of explosion in cases around fake peer review that publishers found and dealt with at that time. Why are publications, you know, of ethics important? Well, we're seeing much more media attention, and you'll see sort of articles there from the past couple of years that highlight the kind of attention that these issues are getting. Everything there from, you know, authorship issues to fake peer review. So let's take you through some publication ethics issues that can arise. There's a very big list there, and it is growing. And the ones I'm going to have today are authorship, so disputes, ghost authorship, gift authorship, and authorship for sale. We'll talk a bit about competing interests, consent to publish, duplicate submission and publication. I'll discuss data or image fabrication and falsification, a bit about plagiarism and text recycling, and we'll also discuss paper mills. So plenty to talk about today, but definitely not the whole list of different types of publication ethics you can come across. So let's first discuss authorship. So who qualifies for authorship? We've got the Taylor and Francis criteria up here for our journals, and there's sort of 5 points to this. So to be an author, or to be considered an author, you should have made a significant contribution to the work reported. So that could be in the conception of the study, how it was designed, the execution of the study, acquiring data, analysing it and interpreting it, or you might have participated in all these areas. You should have drafted or written, or been involved in substantially revising or critically reviewing the article. So you've been part of that article drafting process through one of those 3 ways. You should have all agreed on the journal to which the article will be submitted, so that all authors know and agree the journal and are happy with that. You should have reviewed and agreed on all versions of the article. So that will be before submitting to the journal, during the revision process, you agree on the final version that's been accepted for publication. And if during the post-acceptance editing stage, if there's any changes introduced at that proofread stage, you should have all agreed as authors on those changes as well. And crucially, co-authors and authors agree to take responsibility and be accountable for the contents of the article, and you share responsibility in resolving any questions or queries that have been raised about the accuracy or the integrity of the publication. So really, to hammer that home, any listed author is really a representative of the published paper, and they agree to share accountability. And this is key because authorship comes with legal responsibilities, as we'll see in a bit. So quite commonly, we do come across authorship disputes. These can't be resolved by us as a publisher. It's quite difficult for a publisher to adjudicate because we don't have all the information necessarily. So if the manuscript has not been published yet, and we receive notice that there is an author dispute on a paper, we'll halt all processes to do with that paper. So if it's under peer review will be paused while the dispute is ongoing, and all authors will be notified of this. Typically, we find the institution needs to get involved, but because they are better able to uncover who has contributed what to an article. And once consensus is reached between all authors, including any that have been added or removed. So if you have been added or removed as a co-author from an article, you should have agreed to that. At that point, when we have that agreement, we can proceed. So best practice is to ask all authors listed on the paper to confirm that they agree to the new author list and the authorship order in case any authorship order has changed, and the corresponding author should help coordinate that. So I want to highlight this with a case that we've come across. So we had an article that was reviewed and accepted by an editor. And once it was received by our production team who organized the article for publication, the corresponding author contacted the production editor and asked for a co-author to be removed from the list. So according to our processes, the co-author was contacted to confirm that they were happy to be removed, but a dispute ensued because the co-author did not agree with it. So it was escalated to the editor, and it transpired that there had been a breakdown in the relationship between the authors. And so looking at the co-authors' contributions, we refused to remove them from the article because they did qualify as an author through their contributions, and we published it with the full author list. So the policy on changes to authorship is anybody who meets the authorship criteria should be listed as an author and can only really be removed at their own request. And all remaining authors need to confirm. So what are the issues around gift authorship? So gift authorship is where somebody is listed on an article but actually made no contribution to it. So ultimately, it is a dishonest representation of who was really involved in the work, because the listed authors must be accountable for that published work. And there's some argument that it encourages dishonest scholarly behaviour. If the authors have not been honest about who contributed to the work correctly, what other problems are potentially there within the paper? And sometimes it occurs without the knowledge of whomever the authorship has been gifted to. And occasionally you'll see this where somebody adds a high-profile researcher in their area to the article because maybe they think they will get more favourable peer review. And obviously that should not happen. I discussed authorship for sale and paper mills, and this is something that sort of a bit of a hot topic this year, and the Committee on Publication Ethics held a forum around this last month. So this is where a paper mill is an agency that sells authorship on papers. So the papers themselves might contain fake data or manipulated or stock images, and they might have high levels of plagiarism. So they're not quality, reliable papers. And sometimes prominent authorship spots on these papers, where the agency have managed to get them accepted to a journal, these authorship spots might go for hefty sums of money. So obviously it leads to publication of dishonest and unreliable work. There's potentially duplicate submissions or publication issues because similar papers have been published with different author lists. It might be that one set of results has been sliced up very thinly, which we call salami slicing, and submitted to a range of different journals. And it can lead to researchers being listed as authors on topics outside of their area of expertise, which can damage the reputation of those authors. Lastly, in authorship, I'm going to talk to you about ghost authorship. So ghost authorship, I'd like to stress it differs from what we would call craftsmanship. So for example, if you've had a medical writer or scientific writer involved, that isn't ghost authorship because that will be declared in the paper. But it's where an author has been added, sorry, they've not been added. An author has contributed to an article, but they haven't got the credit because they're not listed in the author list. So it's really a lack of credit for those who have contributed to the work. And it can be used to conceal the involvement of who might have influenced the research, the data analysis, or the conclusions of an article, because it conceals relevant competing interests that have to be declared if you are an author on an article. So that brings us to competing interests as our next topic. Competing interests, this is from our editorial policies, and this is where you declare any associations that can be perceived as others as influencing your work. And this can be financial or it can be non-financial. And I think most people are generally familiar with financial competing interests, so employment or voluntary involvement with groups, the grants you might have received from an entity, personal fees you might have received as consulting fees, for example. If you've applied for a patent or you hold a patent, or your institution or funding organization does in relation to the work, if you've got any stock or share ownership that relates to what you're writing about. But what we like here are the non-financial ones, because those are ones that maybe less familiar of. So it might have been that you've received, equipment or have had access to data repositories or archival resources or maybe museum collections by any entity that might benefit or be at a disadvantage financially from the published findings. Or you might hold a position on an industry body or a private company that again could benefit or be disadvantaged by the research. I touched on this when we talked about medical and scientific writers. So if they've given writing assistance or administrative support from a person or organization, that would need to be declared. One that often gets missed is maybe if you have any personal, political, religious, ideological, academic, or intellectual competing interests, that should be declared. And if you're involved in any legal action related to the work, for example, you might be an expert witness, that should be declared. So consent to publish. We'll talk a bit about this and how it's different from informed consent. So consent to publish is if you have a participant who will be identifiable in the publication. So this could be identifiable patient information, it could be age, gender, diagnosis, treatment, occupation. If you've maybe done an interview with somebody and you want to use quotes, even if you think you've sort of anonymized them thoroughly, sometimes people have noted things about their job titles or it is attributed to them by name. You should have signed consent to publish from the participant. And also covers any videos and audio recordings that you will do and any images that you're providing, for example, medical scans or photos of the participant. So authors should include a statement within the manuscript itself. So when you're writing an article, make sure you confirm that you have obtained consent to publish from the participants. And we have a TNF to publish form, which can be used as if you don't have one yourself, it can be downloaded from our website. And you should have sent the participant a copy of your article that you want to publish so that they know exactly what context, for example, a quote is being given in and that they consent to that. So you should keep the forms because we may request a copy. If we do request a copy of a consent to publish form, we'll store it securely and then destroy it when no longer needed. One thing I haven't mentioned yet, but is actually a fairly important thing that gets missed off, is around acknowledgements. So when you write your acknowledgements for an article, people think it's a lovely thing to say thank you or to acknowledge a contribution of somebody who didn't maybe merit authorship, but certainly helped flesh out an idea, for example. So authors must notify and obtain permission from anybody who is named within the acknowledgement section. Because what this does, it gives them the option not to be named. So for example, might be personal reasons that they don't want to be named. It might be that they have contributed to your research through discussion, but there's maybe a political reason why they shouldn't and don't want to be named. So the person being acknowledged might also think that they should be an author rather than just be acknowledged and think that their contribution was big enough for a co-authorship credit. So when you submit a paper, you should declare that you have obtained agreement from those being named. It also helps prevent authorship disputes down the line if you've had that conversation with the person who's been acknowledged before you submit the article. So duplicate submissions and publications. So duplicate submission is where an author submits to more than one journal at the same time, and they submit the same article to more than one journal at the same time. So you can't do this because it can result in the same paper being published in two different places. And it is also, a time when reviewers are under a lot of pressure and a lot of, there's a sort of a shortage of reviewers. Editors quite often say to us, it puts extra pressure on reviewers if you're submitting to more than one journal at the same time. So on Taylor and Francis journals, authors must declare at submission that the manuscript is not under consideration anywhere else. And prior to publication, authors sign a legally binding publishing agreement. So this is what I referred to earlier when authors have legal responsibilities. So part of that publishing agreement will be to say that, that this work is original that you're publishing with the journal. The corresponding author will sign that agreement on behalf of all co-authors, but all the listed co-authors are collectively accountable. So there are some limited times when it is okay to submit an article that maybe has been published in another language, for example, and these will be considered at the editor's discretion. You have to make it clear on submission that which version is a translation. Best practice will be to state that it's a translation in the abstract and within the main text, and to ensure you have cited the original article. The authors must also check any copyright restrictions or permission requirements on the original article, even if it is their own previous work, to make sure that they're able to do this. You might see data presented at conferences as short abstracts, and then an author wants to submit it as a fuller paper elsewhere. That's fine. Or you might have posted a version of your article in a repository or a preprint server, and then you want to submit it to a journal for consideration and peer review. Again, that's okay. But the key here is transparency. So if there are any previous full versions, they should be referenced within the main text to ensure the editor is aware of it, as well as readers have published. And if you have a preprint, it's good practice to highlight to the editor that your paper is available as a preprint elsewhere. Brings us on to plagiarism and text recycling. So plagiarism is the appropriation of another person or another group's ideas, processes, results, figures, or direct words without giving appropriate credit. So this does include content from books and from websites, for example, blogs. And we use Authenticate, or Crossref similarity check as it's also known, to detect text plagiarism. If we receive an allegation of plagiarism, we will investigate it fully and the authors will be asked for an explanation. So self-plagiarism, or text recycling as is also known, this is the excessive repeated use of your own work. So it might be text, figures, data, or ideas. And what it really does is it leads to redundant publication. So if you are publishing on the same set of data, for example, and you're making it look like almost a new publication every time, you're creating redundancy within the publication record, and it distorts the scholarly record because it makes those results maybe, or the theory seem more important or more proven than it really is. So it's important to be clear about if you have any data sets that you have published elsewhere, for example, making sure that that's very clearly referenced in your paper. And any alleged text recycling will be investigated. And again, we ask authors for an explanation of what's happened. So image or data integrity. So this is something that we're seeing a lot of queries about at the moment. So this article by Elizabeth Bick, Arturo Casadevil, and Ferric Fang really did a look at the prevalence of inappropriate image duplication, particularly within biomedical research publications. So they did this analysis of 20,000 papers from 40 different journals. And the finding I really wanted to highlight here is approximately 1 of every 25 published papers they found contained inappropriately duplicated images, which is a really surprising finding. And I want to highlight here the Taylor and Francis poll images and data. So you'll see, particularly for our science, technology, and medicine journals, we ask authors to be prepared to share the original uncropped and unprocessed images with the journal editorial office upon request. If there is any query raised around your figures that you've provided. If you've done any sort of beautification of an image, that should be noted in the manuscript to say how it's been modified or enhanced with a full explanation as to say why, and that should be in the manuscript as well as the figure legend. Any modifications which can alter the scientific interpretation of an image are not allowed. So this is a case on image manipulation. So we had a reader who notified the journal of potential image manipulation within a paper. So we contacted the corresponding author and we emailed them asking for an explanation, and we ensured that all the other co-authors received it. We didn't actually receive an email back from the corresponding author first. We got an email from the author who was listed first in the authorship list, and they explained that there was no manipulation. And there was a bit of delay, and then we received an email from the corresponding author themselves, and they acknowledged that there might be an issue and that they were going to ask their department to investigate. So a departmental investigation was conducted, and it determined that the manipulation was intentional, but the first author had acted alone in this. The co-authors did, however, acknowledge that they were also accountable under this, and the article was retracted. So retractions brings us on to how we ensure the integrity of the scholarly record and what different post-publication notices mean when you see them. So a post-publication notice is a permanent notice that is attached to the original article or linked to it online. And the purpose of these is to make sure that the scholarly record maintains its integrity. So you'll occasionally maybe see a correction to an article. And this is where there's been no serious breach of publication or research ethics. It is really to correct minor errors which don't affect the conclusions of the article. So it could be that there's a typo in one of the tables that needs to be corrected. A correction notice will be added to highlight what has been corrected in the article. The next is expression of concern. So this is a less common article type, and we issue expressions of concern where maybe there's an investigation ongoing into an article and it's taking a long time to meet a resolution, or the investigation has been inconclusive as to what has happened, but there is enough doubt that a public expression of concern to draw attention to the issue is still necessary. So we carefully consider these to determine if these are going to be appropriate for the article, and the authors will be informed of the publication of the expression of concern on their article. Retraction. So we follow the COPE guidelines for these, and this is where there's maybe been a serious breach of publication or research ethics. So where the findings have been found to be unreliable due to that misconduct. So it might be duplicate publication, it might be plagiarism, it could be that there's been unethical research. Retractions are also issued where honest error is the cause. So for example, you might have found a problem with a data analysis that you've done, and authors themselves can instigate the retraction, and we would really consider that good scholarly behaviour. If we're in the process of investigating an issue and an author or an institution have been non-responsive, we can still take action to retract an article. The original article will remain online with a retracted watermark across it, so it's clear that it's a retracted article. And you'll usually see that the article title has been changed to say retracted article and then the full article title. So some examples of post-publication notices. Here we've got an example of a correction, and it outlines that there was an error in table 1 in this article in the print and online version. And it reports that the errors were in the mean and standard deviations and provides the correct version of the table. And it notes in this case the authors apologized for the errors caused. Here's an example, an expression of concern. So in this case, there were questions about the scientific integrity of the article that were brought to the publisher and editor's attention. So when we reached out to the authors didn't respond to any of the queries within the requested time frame, and this investigation is still ongoing, but the journal wanted to advise readers to interpret the information with due caution in that article. This is an example of a retraction where the authors have got in touch with us. So you'll notice here that it says we, the editor, authors and publishers have retracted the following article, making it really clear that the authors were involved in this. And it gives a good explanation of what's happened. So it talks about there was a coding error in the data analysis, the authors realized this and they contacted the editor and the publisher immediately. We specified that we had no concerns about the research or publishing conduct, and it tells you what's going to happen next. The authors are going to resubmit the paper for consideration by the journal with the new analysis. Occasionally, you'll hear about removals. So as publishers, we have a responsibility towards making sure that the content, once published, is permanent, so that problematic articles can't just silently disappear. So we only consider removals where the entire article is removed from our website. We only consider these in specific circumstances. For example, there is defamation in the article or another legal concern. The content is subject to a court order. If there is high risk of harm if acting upon whatever is outlined in the content, or if there is a breach of privacy. So we don't disappear the record of the article. The removal notice will be posted and outline the reasons for removal in place of the article, but the metadata around the article will still be there. So this is an example. You can see that the link to the article, to the DOI, is still live, but it has replaced the article with a notice explaining that this particular article was removed for legal reasons. So who's responsible for publication ethics? Well, everybody involved in the publishing process are responsible and accountable. So that's authors, institutions, the journal editors, our peer reviewers, and publishers themselves. And collectively, it's important that we work together to make sure that content that is published is accurate and reliable, and that if there are any ethics issues which are brought to our attention before or after publication, that these are investigated thoroughly and any corrective measures taken as appropriate, be that a correction, perhaps an expression of concern or a retraction. So I'm going to finish up with some tips on how to avoid problems when preparing an article. Tip number one is really about agreeing authorship early on based on what criteria the journal has and the responsibilities of the co-authors. And ensure that anybody who meets that authorship criteria has been included on your article. The corresponding author really needs to be aware of the role and responsibilities that has. So they're responsible for ensuring that all authors agree on which journal to submit to, that if there are any changes to the manuscript made during revision, including any changes to an authorship list, that these are all agreed by all co-authors. And the corresponding author, when they submit the article, are responsible for ensuring all those relevant declarations about funding, about competing interests for all authors, not just themselves, have been declared. Our second tip is about securely storing original data. So all original data, including images, need to be clearly labeled and stored, and they should be the unprocessed versions, so they shouldn't be the cropped versions that you might be using within an article to sort of edit it into the format. They should be the uncropped, unprocessed images, and you should clearly label them and store them so any author is able to retrieve and understand what that file is. Be ready to share the files with the journal editorial office upon request. We can request them even after publication if any queries arise. Ensure anonymity of participants in any data sets which need to be shared. So this could be that there is a patient ID on an image, or it could be that there is data within the data set that needs to be anonymized itself. Check the mandatory requirements of the journal before submitting. So the journal homepage will have a list of requirements. So you'll have to confirm about the originality of your article and research. If it's a clinical trial, the journal will have instructions about making sure the clinical trial is registered in a publicly accessible database and includes the registration number in the article. If the journal has a data sharing policy, that will be listed on the journal homepage. And at Taylor and Francis, we have 4 levels of data sharing policy. So do check before you submit to the journal. And they may also have mandatory data deposition policies. Tip 4 is to make sure you include declarations on the ethical conduct of the study. So if your paper has had, your study, sorry, has had to have ethical approval, this should be listed. It should list who the appropriate ethics board were, for example, your institutional research ethics committee. And if they waived ethical approval, this needs to be explained why it was waived in the article. If your research involves animals or stem cells or technologies that can impact privacy, for example, facial recognition technology, you need to outline what ethics approval processes you went through there and consider dual use there with research of concern. You need to say if you've had informed consent from subjects to participate, and again, if that was waived, who waived it and why. And if you have any identifiable participants in your article, make sure you've got consent for publication and keep copies of those forms. And the last tip is to cite all relevant sources and previous versions of an article and obtain any permissions you need for reuse of any material or images within your article. So prior to submission, check your manuscript for unintended text reuse. So it might be through a plagiarism checker like Turnitin. You should cite appropriate, balanced and relevant sources. So when I say balanced sources, making sure that your research isn't necessarily within an echo chamber, and look at the balance of the references within your article, making sure that they're evidence-based, peer-reviewed content. If there are any previous full versions that exist online, or maybe another citable format, for example, a preprint, then ensure you've cited that in the article. And ensure you've got any permissions from copyright or license holder. For example, it might be a screenshot of something. It might be an image. And make sure you've got those from any third parties that you need. So I'd like to take this time to thank you for your attention today. And I believe there's going to be a Q&A session, so I'll hand back to Samrat to facilitate that.
Sarah, thank you so much for this very informative presentation on ethics in publishing and also integrity of authors. I think it was a very good combination of some very basic things, which I think all researchers should know, like I myself have published in the past, and it was a good reminder again. But there were also very good tips and very good detailed information about the publishing process and what the editors are concerned with. So I think really, really, really important information which you shared. Thanks so much. Excellent presentation. Let's go into the Q&A. I'll start with the first question we had here was one of the attendees is asking, Sarah, if I do a characterization from someone else, should I include him or her as a co-author?
I'm not sure what's meant by characterization. So if it's that you've used work from somebody else, you need to look at appropriate citation of that work, and if you actually need permissions from that person to use the material. For example, it might be from a database. Quite often, I think people forget to get permissions around data use. Even if it's an open data set, you should look at the permissions available there. So if you're using somebody else's work, look at what permissions are required. If somebody has been involved in the conception, the study design, the writing of the article, look at that author criteria and then sort of make that decision if they need to be part of the research. If they meet the contribution criteria, they should be.
I think co-author is really someone who worked together with you on that article. I think if you are using somebody's illustrations or maybe some of graphics, then definitely you should give credit to that person, right? But I don't think that qualifies him or her as a co-author if you just use some images. That maybe could answer that. Another question is, what if a paper is submitted and published without my name, even if I participated in that? What should I do in that case?
I would get in touch with the corresponding author in the first instance to raise the question about authorship and try to come to an agreement there. If it goes into an authorship dispute, for it can't be agreed who should be a co-author or not, I would notify the journal, but be prepared for them to go to your institution to ask them to investigate to see who merits credit as co-authorship.
Okay, thank you for answering that. If I want to, another question, Sarah, if I want to publish a work in a journal article and part of it is already published as an extended abstract and is available online, what do I do in that case? Do I need to take copyright first or just use a reference to that already published work? Like, could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so if something has already been published as maybe an extended abstract for a conference, when writing the journal article, think about what you're adding that's new to the journal article, what's new after that extended abstract, and then make it very clear, reference in your article that extended abstract so that the journal editor knows about it, can look at it if they want to, and in your cover letter I would explain what the journal article, what's new in it that has been added to make it a full journal article.
Okay. Another question, which is kind of in line with the previous one, is what if I already have presented a concept at a conference as a poster and now want to submit the same in an expanded form to a publication? What should be mentioned in this case?
Yeah, I think it's perfectly fine to submit as a journal article something you've published as a poster in a conference. Again, you might want to highlight it to the journal editor in your cover letter, but it's fine to submit that as a full journal article.
Okay. Another question I found quite interesting is, can a research article be republished in an index journal if it already has been published in a predatory journal mistakenly or willingly?
Yeah, that's a complex issue and does happen, more often than you think. The answer is no. So if something has been published in a predatory publication, most of the time you would not be able to then republish in an index journal. I mean, there are some complications around this where authors have realized that the journal is predatory, so have asked the predatory journal to withdraw, and then the predatory journal has just published anyway. If that has happened, do speak to the journal editor of the journal you want to submit to, but most of the time it will be, if you have published in a predatory journal first, you wouldn't be able to then republish in an index journal.
Okay. Thank you for, I think that was a very good answer to this. Another question we have here is, do you think misquoting sources or misrepresenting source ideas or main points violate publication ethics?
Oh, sorry, my mic cut out there. Sorry, what was that question?
If sources are misquoted or misrepresented ideas, would that count as violating publication ethics?
Yes. So if you are sort of presenting something in an article and using a reference to back it up, and that reference doesn't actually represent what you're saying, that can be considered a form of misconduct. So make sure that what you are writing in your article is backed up by the article that you're referencing. So do check that reference. I think sometimes it's quite tempting to be, oh, somebody has used this as a citation for something before, I'll just add it in without necessarily reading it in full. So do have a look at that article to make sure that it backs up what you are saying in your article if you want to use it as a reference.
Okay, thank you for that. Another question, could you just share some articles on publication ethics in the humanities? I'm not sure if that was mentioned in the presentation already.
So yes, so there were links to some resources around publication ethics in the humanities. So the Declaration of Bellum is one that's quite often looked at because it's around that working within communities elements. Yeah, if you have a look at the presentation, the relevant links are in there. And I would also look at some of the big societies, particularly I think some of the societies within anthropology have some really good ethics guidance there that again go into some of the points that the Declaration of Bellum does. Yeah, so I think like if you go to some of the major societies in your subject area, you should find additional ethics guidance. But of course, if anybody wants to get in touch, I'm happy to talk further about that.
Okay, great. So just to reassure the attendees that we will share the presentations with you in a follow-up email. I have to take the consent of Sarah. Sarah, do you agree that we can share your presentation and the recording as well?
Yes, I do.
Since we are talking about ethics, so we have to stick to that as well in our webinar. So no worries, you will get all the presentations and the recording. Also, we will issue a certificate for this webinar to those who have attended. We're coming, I think, slowly to the end of this webinar. It has already been more than 90 minutes. And I'm very thankful to both speaker and attendees for staying on so long. It's already Friday evening here in India. If there are, we can take, I think, one or two more questions, Sarah. So okay. This is the chance now. Sarah is available, so shoot your questions to her. We have one question which was there also. I was not so sure about that. So the person is asking if a project is funded by some agencies, then of course the agency is mentioned, but what should authors do when the research is fully funded by the researcher in individual capacity? So, should that be mentioned or can that be just left out? I don't know if you understood that.
Yeah, so if you have funded your research yourself, you might want to, so when you submit to a Taylor and Francis journal, there'll be a box about funding for you to enter your funding information, and you should put that in there, say that it's self-funded research, so that the journal editor knows.
Okay, good to know. I think so that answers that question as well. I'm looking in the question answer box. We are, I think we are not having, we didn't receive any new one. So I would say then we just conclude it for today. Please share also this, I would say, this very important webinar with your peers if they were not able to join us today. I think it was an excellent session. Sarah, once again, thanks for joining and for your contribution. And thank you to all of you joining our webinar. This was the last webinar on how to get published in a peer-reviewed journal. We had 4 of them, so if you are interested to see the 3 previous ones, you can check our YouTube channel and watch them. Wishing you all a nice weekend. Here, it's as I said already, we're having an evening, so the end of the day, work day is coming near. And Sarah, wishing you a nice afternoon. And thanks again for joining. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely.
Yep. Bye-bye. Bye. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.